calling in, and we're recording this session for those of you that maybe are going to catch this later, or if you watch it and you want to share it, we'll get the link out. Maybe quick reminder, to have your cameras muted if you would when we're doing this to avoid any interruptions. I'll do an introduction, but today the CSIA Emerging Leaders group is putting on a learning webinar here on strategic prioritization and time management. We've been meeting over the last couple months and talking about topics that are of interest to those that are emerging, taking on or expanding their leadership influence within their organizations. And this was one of the topics that came about as of interest. So we're going to talk about this. And so I'll give you a little session overview here. I'll introduce myself. I'll introduce the team, what our purpose is, why we're doing this. And then we'll talk a little bit about strategic prioritization. We'll talk a little bit about time management. And then the group discussion you see at the end, and I put best part. When we did this last time a couple of months ago, we got some feedback that really was the truly most valuable part of this, getting together small breakout rooms of people to talk through a few questions, meet new people, build your network within the CSIA community. So please make that a priority. Stick around. You'll probably meet somebody new. You may get new ideas. You know, one of the mantras of CSIA, Charlie Bergman, one of the folks that was involved from the beginning, was you share one idea, you get 10 in return. And so hopefully we can kind of make that be the case here in this session. So stick around for that. At the end, we'll spend 10 minutes or so on that. A little about myself. Darren Dieleman, I'm the Vice President of Operations with Interstates. There you can see up on the top right, Interstates is we're a systems integrator, also electrical contractor, design builder, based here in the Midwest. Our headquarters is in a small town called Sioux Center, Iowa, which is where I live. We've got a heavy presence throughout the Midwest and the U.S. We'll do work coast to coast, and we also have a handful of folks stationed out of Germany, is where their office out of to support clients over in Europe. I've been with the company 10.5 years. Maybe unlike most of you or some of you, or at least most people within the systems integration world, my background is in accounting and finance, and then I was in manufacturing operations full-time for 7 years before I came to Interstate. So I really came from outside of the industry and have been on the learning journey for over a decade now since. I'm on the steering committee for the Emerging Leaders team. I'm also, as of a couple of years ago, on the CSIA board of directors and serve there. So I've been pretty involved in the organization for the last 6 or 7 years. One thing I want to give you a head on as we flip to the next slide, you're going to see different logos. You saw Interstate's logo on the top right on the last slide. You see DMC's logo, John Sullivan, who leads our committee. He works for DMC. Him and his company graciously shared a lot of the content that we're going to be going through today. So that's why you see DMC letterhead on a lot of these PowerPoint slides. So CSI Emerging Leaders, what's the point? What do we do? We're a group that's really about developing and aspiring individuals to promote.
Uh-oh. Looks like we lost Darren there for a second.
Trying to figure out whose side that was on. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like it's for me as well. So we'll sit tight for a second while he rejoins. But I can talk about this so we can kind of move past it. CSIA Emerging Leaders, we've kind of been growing and expanding. Our goal as a group is to find and promote leadership resources that for people who are either the next generation of leaders or people who are heavily looking to develop themselves. So from that perspective, there's lots of things that we've been doing and generating content. We're doing a webinar every other month at this time. The previous one was coaching. We've done some book club stuff. Hey, Darren, I see you're back. I just kind of kept talking about the mission of Emerging Leaders. We lost you there for a second, and we don't have your screen anymore if you want to reshare.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know what happened, but I will reshare my screen. This was not a part of the plan, but the screen should be coming back. So sorry about that. We tested everything. Everything was going great.
Yep. Yeah, we've got your screen again.
All right, we got it back.
Take back off it. Yep.
Okay. Well, thanks for picking me up, John. All right, so that's the group. Next events here. We currently are planning every other month, and we're on the second Thursday of the month, and at 11 a.m. Eastern time is when we're doing these. Coming up on April 13th, we've got a session around giving feedback. And then on the 15th of May, we've got the executive conference. Hopefully most of you are able to make that. We're going to have a happy hour. We're also going to have a lunch. That was a highlight, I know, for many that were able to attend last year. Out in Colorado, we'll be down in New Orleans. So please check that out. And then we're open to future topic ideas. So if you've got something you're really interested in hearing about, reach out to one of us on the team. Otherwise, regarding this group, how to stay involved, we've got a LinkedIn group. And John, I don't know if you're going to put some of these links in the chat, but we've got a LinkedIn group for the emerging leaders.
I put the first link, which is to the presentation that Greg is giving here in 2 months. It's already in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and throw links in for all of these things into the chat as well over the next few seconds here.
Okay. We got a forum on CSIA. We get a chance to sign up for any emailings that we have coming out. And then there's also a link to the survey there that John's going to put in there that's a chance for you to see if you're interested in peer groups. That was one of our topics that we went through several months ago, that there was a lot of interest back at the conference in 2022 about, and then a chance to share any topic ideas as well. Okay, so fair amount of introduction there. Apologize, but really want to, from a conversation starter, now we're going to shift. We're going to really dive into strategic prioritization, time management. I'm not an expert on this topic. This has been a key part of DMC's training program for new leaders, as we mentioned off the top. So again, kudos to DMC for allowing us to use some of this content. I've also added my own flavor to some of these as well, things that I've kind of learned over the years. So we're not experts, but hopefully we can dive in a little bit. So wanted to, we want this to be interactive. The goal isn't, that we sit here and just do presentations. We want to drive some interaction. So we got a couple questions on the screen and would love to have anybody unmute, put answers in the chat to any of these. But how do you organize your day? And what do you decide to work on next? Is it just one big series of firefight? Is it whoever comes and talks to you? I mean, how do you do that? And maybe a follow-up is, what's the biggest challenge you've experienced with time management and prioritization? Anything that you're like, I struggle with this the most. And then you had a productive day win, or feel you had an unproductive day win. So would welcome anybody unmuting, throwing in the chat, speaking to any of these questions or comments to kind of get us rolling here.
Hey, Darren, this is Ken O'Malley, AE Solutions.
Hello, Ken.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, I don't know if it's exactly an answer to your question, but I had one of our earlier career staff, early to mid, say, I get in on Monday morning, I don't know what to do. And, we talked about that. Where does he start? What's important? What's urgent? And my takeaway from that is it was a failure of leadership. If leadership isn't giving, what are the important things that the organization needs to be focused on? What are the priorities? It makes it harder for the folks that can make those decisions in the moment. So it doesn't answer your question, but that to me was a red flag for our organization that we needed to provide better direction.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. That's a great comment, right? Because we're thinking about this for ourselves, but if you're leading a team, kind of as you noted, Ken, as a leader, this may be an opportunity to talk to those on your team about this very thing. How do you feel like you have clarity on what your priorities are, what you should be focused on? Good point. Any other comments? This is on your mind when you see these questions?
Yeah, this is Mark Neiman at Beckhoff Automation. One of the things we've been working on is cascading goals. So we're just finished up our initial goals for 2023, and then the idea is to build those department goals off of that, and then those individual goals off the department goals. So, you know, that really kind of, for us, that ties into the prioritization. So what's important, what do we want to drive for the next 12 months? So we're very early on in the process. So I feel we have a step in the right direction. It'll be interesting to see how we sustain that over the months. So, but looking forward to seeing what we can do with it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark.
Hi, this is Barbara with Win 911 Software. I took it on a little bit more of a task-based or a daily basis kind of thing, Darren, with that. When I see that question, one of the things I do when I'm planning out my day or my week, what do I need deliverables for other people? What can I get other folks working on that I really am kind of being held hostage to move on with that project or that deliverable I'm expected to have done? So the first thing I do is weed through everything and go, okay, I need this person doing this for me, that person doing that for me. And I make them understand as well that, you know, their input on this particular request is part of the bigger picture. And that goes, and I encourage my team to do that same thing as well. So, you know, the cascading goals, all of those things, so important. I kind of looked at it like on a daily.
Yeah. Thank you, Barbara. That's good. John, any comments? Go ahead.
This is Stephen Henneveld with Concept Systems. I find as an individual contributor back in the day, to-do lists were really important. It was important that I got things done. But as a leader, I feel like a couple of years ago, I realized if I'm not leading with intention, so instead of asking myself, did I get the things done that I wanted? I asked myself, was I being the kind of person, the kind of leader that I want to be? And that enables me to lead more effectively, because I can't lead the others if I'm not leading myself, you know.
Yeah, great point, Stephen. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it is. If you're not practicing living out the habits, it's hard to do that and lead that in others as well. I see some in the chat point about some different tools. You know, Tim noted OneNote. I use OneNote a ton. Some use task lists. I think there's lots of different ways to go on about it. Any other comments before we push forward? This is good.
Just a quick one from Tim, Data Science Automation. So on how to decide what to work on next, we actually have to real clear breakdown of, we expect you to be this percentage helping customers, this percent steering the company, this percent working on strategy, you know, and, you know, while that we can't do it on a day-by-day basis, we do have very clear goals on what are the balances between the buckets that we expect people at different levels to be working on. So I find that helps to prioritize it.
Good. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. We'll push forward a little bit. I don't know if John's still on to keep an eye on the chat for me, but so
yeah, there were a lot of things in the chat. People threw out a lot of tools and ideas and things like that. But yeah, I think you can kind of push forward.
Sounds great. Good. So DMC, John they had this slide in here with a picture of the easy button. I personally really liked seeing this, and so I left it in. And as I was doing this, and what's the point? And oh, hey, I got to add this in here. So this is a picture of my desk with an easy button on it. I actually used to know someone that worked at Staples and got me an actual easy button. So I've been, you know, anytime I feel like I don't know what to do, I just hit that, and then it automatically pops up in my head what I need to work on, right? So then that works out for me. No, that's not true. By the way, you can tell, you see the 10 key in the background, that's my accounting, the side of me there. So I felt like I needed to hit that stereotype as well. But the point here is, and why we even put about this is, you know, if it were only this simple, right? As an easy button or a singular tool or whatever, but it's just simply not. You know, I think this whole idea of what to prioritize, what's most important, is a critical leadership skill that I know that I've been on a journey to try to learn and get better at and feel like I have. And it's not a simple solution. It may not be a one size fits all. What works for me maybe doesn't work for John, and vice versa for you. So that's kind of the point there. Another little cool illustration. So again, DMC had this slide in here, and I really enjoyed this because I literally just had this argument or discussion, not argument, with someone here on a weekend away here a couple weekends ago about, you know, what bacon is the best, you know, and John, I don't know what you prefer. We changed the DMC faces out to put yourself in mine, but I know that crispy bacon is the best and is the way to go. So I don't know.
You put me on the right side. See, I don't want my bacon to crumble. It's if your bacon is too firm, it's just like a steak well done, right? Like your bacon needs to be the right amount of softness. I feel affronted that it's soggy. Soggy is not the right description, but
yeah, I disagree, John. I think it can be really crispy. If it breaks into pieces, that's okay. No, you don't think so? Oh boy.
Can't forget about Chewy.
Shoot. Well, okay. We should. Pavel, thanks for throwing that in. I believe we should have put your picture up here with the chewy bacon. But anyway, again, this is just a funny little visualization I know DMC was using, and I found kind of humorous as well to say, look, when you come out of this and you're like, well, hey, task lists work for so-and-so, this works for Darren, great. It's not a one size fits all. Hopefully some of the ideas you get either from what's popping in the chat or even in the small groups later will help you. Okay, productivity. So, we got a bunch of pictures of books out there about productivity. There's obviously a ton of them claiming to unlock the secrets of productivity. If you're like me, how you organize your weeks, how you organize your days really has a strong impact on how either productive I actually am or how productive I feel. And so, again, you can get a lot of different opinions from a lot of different people on what that looks like. But the key thing is you got to come up with a system that works for you, that works for your role, works for your organization. And then again, as a leader, I want to reinforce too, you got to lead yourself well, but you really need to help your people along this journey as well. Okay, we got one more question we wanted to throw out, and then we're going to dive into some specific content on. So quick discussion. What's the biggest challenge with prioritization? When you think about, I don't know what to focus on. I don't know what my priorities are. I don't have enough time. Those are all probably possible options. Does anyone have any, look, I just really struggle with this when it comes to prioritization, time management.
I'd say getting sidetracked before the last goal or task was actually completed. So
okay,
not even a problem with time management, but just getting the next thing needs to be done now, whereas the last thing needed to be done. Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
I think for me, something I struggle with is how to effectively schedule meetings so they end up just scattershot all over my calendar, and then you kind of have 10 minutes, 15 minutes of dead time between them, and you end up losing a lot of time throughout the day or throughout the week.
Nikhil, good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Just saw Nikhil out in San Diego yesterday, but I think that's a great point. And honestly, the thing I found, the more either leadership responsibility you take on or more you have, the more meetings you have, which makes that even more challenging. And getting a handle on that early and a bit of a system and knowing what works for you is pretty critical, because it typically grows, it doesn't shrink. So that's a good observation. Yeah, thanks. Any other comments here? Biggest challenge? Okay, we will push forward. Strategic prioritization. So I think it's, what I really liked about when I got the slides, from John at DMC about this, what I really liked was the term strategic being in here, because simply prioritization implies that it's a very short-term or narrowly focused activity, in my opinion. Like, well, I got to prioritize what to do this morning, or I got to prioritize what to do this afternoon. That's a different level of prioritization in my mind than when you start talking about what's strategically prioritizing your time. So kudos to DMC for really pushing it in this direction. And the next slide here, one thing, and there's a lot of detail on here that doesn't mean much to most of you. This is actually I'm being pretty open here. This is actually what my quote unquote portfolio looks like. So at Interstates, we talk a lot about our portfolio. We went to a Helix type structure in an organization years ago, which is basically a whole bunch of, it's not a networked org structure, but basically a whole bunch of different teams. Every team has a leader. especially our leaders have a ton of different teams that they're on, and you can see that just in my portfolio right here. But my point of even showing you this is we all have a portfolio. Now, maybe for many of you, it's just simply a job description, like you're a project manager or you're a senior controls engineer or whatever, right? And maybe it's less things than what I have, say, on my portfolio, but we all have a portfolio and hopefully some guiding direction as to what is our priority, okay? And one of the things that I wanted to highlight in the middle there, it says top 3 focuses. So one of the things that we have really focused on is making sure everybody knows, like when push comes to shove, when all the meeting invites come in, like what are your top priorities? So for myself, I lead our team that sets direction for our industrial automation and integration business group. I'm a member of our executive team, and I'm a part of our group that evaluates all of our investments. Those are my top 3 items. So I need to prioritize my day, my time with those things in mind as my top priorities. So my challenge to you a little bit here is, what's your portfolio? Are you clear about it? Are you and your boss clear about it? Are you and those you're leading clear about it? And I think you got to dig deeper than just say, oh yeah, I have a job description somewhere. No, my job is to lead a technical team of people. No, my job is to project manage X, Y, and Z projects. Like, you got to get specific about it. And I think it can really help you when it comes then to strategic prioritization. Okay. Another thing that we talk a lot about in interstates is, the 80-20 rule, which is the whole Pareto principle, which means, typically 20% of your activity yields 80% of your results. So what we've tried to do is, again, if you answer that question in the second point there, what are your top responsibilities? If you can define that, then our goal, at least at Interstates, is that we should be spending the majority of our time on those tasks, on those items that generate the most results. So again, we have leaders identify their top 3, and then we try to prioritize and focus our days around that. So I don't know, maybe some examples here for an engineer, maybe delivering client work is their top priority. So your goal should be to maximize the amount of time they're spending on delivering client work. Maybe if you're a lead engineer, it's about mentoring and training others. Maybe that's truly number 1, or doing design reviews. Are you clear on what your priorities are? And then you can take a look at your days and your weeks through the lens of that. Another example, we've probably all seen this somewhere along, you almost can't get through too many leadership training sessions without seeing this example. And so John and DMC had this in their PowerPoint. I thought this kind of fed in perfectly to this idea to talk about what's your portfolio and what are your top items. And basically, the concept is, if you put the small things in, if you put the sand in the jar and the pebbles in the jar before the big rocks, on the top picture there, you can't fit the big rocks in if you do it in that order. But if you put the big rocks in first, and then you add in the pebbles, and then you add in the sand, you can make it all fit. And the one key point, as I was reading through how DMC trains on this, is they talk about, well, the sand and the pebbles, as it sinks down in, it helps fill in some of the gaps to help you get flow in your day. So it's not like, you may spend 4 hours, or 6 hours a day, or 8 hours if you're, I don't know how many hours in a day you may work, but you may spend most of your time on these big rocks. But finding ways to work in some of these other tasks, some of these other things that are important, they're maybe not in your top 3 to create flow in your day, is a bit of an art. And I thought that was a really nice point and a really nice visual to use in this example here. All right, we're moving. We keep moving just because we only have 40 minutes or so. So this was in here, and I know Frank Rorden, who's the president CEO of DMC. I really like this quote. Wanted to leave this in. Do what only you can do, which must be a quote that Frank is famous for. I don't know, John, is this kind of like, do you got plaques on the office of Frank showing this, or maybe Nikhil put that up in San Diego? I don't know.
Yeah, it's just more of like a internal priority standpoint, is make sure that you're doing the things that make sure you're prioritizing, make sure that you're getting the big rocks done that no one else can take care of before you start dealing with other things. And, I think the caveat is sometimes like I'm the only person that can wash the dishes in the Denver office, and that's fine. It doesn't necessarily mean like things are below you. It's just that, do the things that have the biggest impact and that you can put on your, on your list there. So.
Yeah, great point, John. That doesn't mean, again, you only get down to doing the rocks, right? There is the sand, there's the washing the dishes, there's the whatever. And again, if you're hard of being a servant leader, you're not above washing dishes and taking out the trash if it's something that needs to get done, right? Great point. So, okay, well, what does this look like in practice, right? We're getting at, and we're going to talk a little bit about delegation. But again, if you know and understand what you're primarily responsible for, you can use that as the lens, as the filter through which how you plan your weeks and then how you plan your days, that sort of thing. Another, I wanted to tie in here a couple interstates things here. One of the things we talk about, so now we've identified what our portfolio is. We've maybe even had a conversation with our leader. We didn't just simply say, oh yeah, I got a job description. No, we had a, like, are you clear? Is your team clear on what their priorities are and what that means? They should be spending 80% of their time engineering work or doing mentoring or doing training or talking with clients. I mean, so you have those discussions. We've clarified this. We do what we call a role clarity exercise to make this almost really simple. It's not the job description, but my primary responsibility is this. My secondary responsibility is this. So primary is generally going to be those top three, plus maybe a couple others. You're secondarily responsible for this. Maybe that's your taking out the trash, or washing the dishes example that John threw out. And then what you are not responsible for. So we call those things out in a role clarity exercise. And then as a result, we list out what you need to start doing, stop doing, continue doing. We found this. We have almost all leaders that step up into a new position go through this exercise for clarity. Our leaders, as I mentioned, have an actual documented portfolio that I showed you an example of earlier. But the start, stop, continue doing can really help you with when we talk about delegation here in a minute. So we could expound on that more if we want to, if anybody's got questions later. So this is the Eisenhower matrix. Honestly, I wasn't quite frankly that familiar with it before I was prepping to do this. But, typically, obviously you want to work on, things that fall in the top left, and hopefully those things fall and line up with what's in your portfolio. But, to put a box around, this bottom left, which are things that are important, they need to get done. They say they're not important. I put a circle around this. We said not important for you to do. So they have to get done. But maybe you're not the best person to do them. Those are the things you really should look at. Would somebody really else benefit from doing this and having this opportunity? The thing we talk a lot, one of our why we exist as a company at Interstates is providing opportunities for our people. When we delegate, we provide an opportunity for someone else, and we maybe don't always see it that way. Like, I don't know if you have this, but if you've kind of grown up and you've done a lot of things in your career and you're like, well, I don't want to seem like I'm dumping tasks on people, especially maybe it's not your number one thing to do. Someone may take it as a great challenge. Someone maybe hasn't been exposed to some of the things that you have been. So how do you view that as an opportunity to develop them and give them an opportunity? The bottom right here, I want to note, if it's not important at all to do for anybody to do and it's not urgent, delete it. And I would challenge, we could spend a whole nother hour talking about meetings, but if you're like me, my calendar has been overrun with meetings at times, and I've had to just take a step back, and reoccurring meetings can be great, like that feature, like, oh, I want to talk to John once a month. Let me just put a reoccurring meeting out there. So it's great in that regard. It's horrible though, when it comes to like, excuse me, killing things or stopping things, or, hey, John, do we need to meet monthly anymore? Or do we need to meet monthly for an hour? Maybe we can talk bi-monthly for 30 minutes. Like, audit your meetings, audit your time, and that will, maybe there's just some things though you need to kill. We'll talk about time auditing in a little bit. All right, delegate, or not delegate. I'm not going to go through this in tons of detail, but basically, how often does it need to happen? How long will it take someone to learn to do it? Who would benefit from the growth opportunity? use delegation to help with succession planning. We were just talking about providing opportunities for our people with that. People use different terms. DMC talks about if you win the lottery and leave, who's going to take that over? There's the black swan event. There's there's more morbid, right, ways to talk about this, the get hit by the bus thing, right? But, so hopefully as leaders and as emerging leaders, you're looking at those that are coming up behind you, and you're looking at the roles that your company's going to need in the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years, and be positioning people for that. Okay. Last slide on strategic prioritization. We put this little slide up here really as a challenge for you to do something and commit to it. You could go this way, you could go that way, you could go another way, but just coming out of this, I challenge everybody, like, especially if you're feeling like, hey, look, I'm not controlling my calendar very well. Like I'm not sure I'm always focused on the right things, or I think I am, but maybe I should have this conversation with my boss, or I have this clarity, but I'm not sure my team that I'm leading has this clarity. Lean into it and actually commit to doing something different than you're doing before, especially if you're in that boat. Okay. I've been, an example personally for me is I've been focused as a goal on my effectiveness in decision making. And, so this is relating to strategic prioritization, because, there will be times I would be responsible for certain decisions that maybe I wasn't, as my role has kind of changed over the last couple of years. Maybe someone else was best suited to do it. So I've had to give up some things that frankly I really like to do, and maybe I'm pretty good at, to let someone else do it, because it's just not the best use of my time. It doesn't line up with my top 3, 80-20 rule kind of thing. So challenge you to commit to it, lean into it. All right, we're getting to the home stretch. We're one more plug for the breakout rooms at the end. Best part, right? People are sleeping now, but wake up then. Just stay connected. John will send you in the breakout room, so you can go back to your nap now. Time management. Okay, we're just going to talk for a little bit about time management. This is kind of a crash course really in all this. So we talked now about prioritization. Hopefully you've got some clarity on maybe you had this all nailed before, but hey, how can I go about making sure I'm focused on the right things? But you still have your calendar, you still have your day, you still got to navigate through this. So let's talk about time management just a little bit. And I love this slide, frankly. This was one DMC had in this training around multitasking, and really the myth of multitasking. I'm sure there's science that I don't understand, that I haven't read through, that explain how it physically it does not actually work. But if I've done this, and if you're like me, you get in stretches where you're really busy, and I can watch this training while emailing this person, while responding to Teams messages. Well, okay. I mean, am I really, you may be doing that right now, frankly, which that's your prerogative, but my guess is you're not getting as much then out of the training as what you would if you were actually all in engaged, So I think about being all in when you're into a task. Your brain's going to be more efficient doing it that way. There's a book, we put some book slides up earlier. There's a book called Indistractable. I had a peer group member actually refer that book. That book's fantastic. But I don't know if any of you are like this, but especially since the pandemic, I have way more Teams calls, and the temptation to multitask and think that I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone is just way more prevalent than what it was before for me. And so I've got to really kind of watch out for that. Remove distractions. Maybe you got to turn off Slack, turn off Teams. You got to do some of those things to make sure you don't have distractions pop up in front of you. And if you feel like you're going into something with the idea, I can multitask, then just don't show up. Don't just say, hey, I don't think I should be in this meeting. It's not worth me going to this training. I mean, that's fine. Then you're making decisions back to that committing point we just talked about. Okay, I feel like I was on a soapbox there. This was another, I put Interstate's logo up here. This is not my calendar actually, but control your time and calendar. We talked about this. I've personally struggled with this, especially as I've taken on more responsibility over the years. I think I'm in a better spot now for sure than what I was, but you know, my first point there is you control your calendar does not control you. And I have not always felt that way. And maybe there are times where you feel like you aren't in control of your week. It's just completely chaotic. And I think it's just a mindset shift that like, my week is the way it is because I've allowed it to happen. Either I've not been willing to have a conversation and tell someone, look, I just can't go to that. Or I signed up for too many things, too many teams. They were probably all good things, but there's just still only many hours in the day. Or you're feeling like your main responsibilities are suffering because you're just too busy. I challenge you, you control your calendar does not control you. And we'll talk about time auditing and some other techniques here that I think will help you with that. But, you know, be intentional about planning your days and weeks. And to me, it starts with planning things much bigger than just what's going on this week. Like, where do I want to be spending my time? What do I have reoccurring meetings on and what do I not? And I'm looking at it more macro level, and then I can back into what's on my calendar this week. And if I make the right long-term decisions, I end up making better short-term decisions. You know, here's a point, consider categorizing your calendar to match your priorities. So you can do a visual, like, am I spending my time? Maybe it's yellow or red or however you want to categorize those things that are your top priorities. Consider doing that to help you see visually whether your time's being spent where you want it to be. Okay, these couple ideas, this is around, you know, time management, using time blocking and time boxing. And I really like these concepts. I honestly personally use them. I don't know that I'd used these terms before I read this and looking at how DMC trains on this, but time blocking is basically allocating periods in order to find time for something, you know, something general to do. So I'll block focus time, for example. That's kind of my idea of time blocking, where I'm going to focus for maybe 2 hours in the morning. I've personally found, like, around time blocking, that if I can't block 2 hours, it's almost not worth it. Like, 30 minutes for sure, like doing a time block for 30 minutes, sure, it helps for some things, but like to really dig into deeper projects and things, I need 2 hours. You know, something different may work for you. Again, you know, just something to consider. And then time boxing, which is allowing a specific amount of time and setting it aside to work on a specific task or goal. I also do this. So I may, hey, look, this 30 minutes is, or in this case, an hour, this hour is to watch this webinar on strategic prioritization and time management from the Emerging Leaders Committee. I'll put it on my calendar. I'll put the link to watch the recording. That's time boxing. And I will do that for projects as well. Maybe you found success. But this falls apart really quickly when you don't do what you had your time block to do, because then if that's your way to remind yourself to do it, then you've typically gotten behind it, you know. So if you're going to commit, my advice on, if you're going to do time boxing, become diligent about actually doing it when you say you're going to do it, or it'll be a house of cards.
Yeah, this is a big one for me. I did this and then I didn't ever honor it. I was like, oh, something else urgent came up, and then it just stopped being useful.
And it's pointless, right? Yeah. They're just a reminder that you need to reschedule, you know. John, you and I, yeah, we could do a focus group on that. Yeah, same thing, right? I started doing that. I'm getting better. I'm not perfect, but it doesn't work if you don't do it, and it actually causes bigger issues. Okay, focus time. So this, you know, this can, again, kind of, you know, we talked about time blocking, you know, like I said, I'll set aside time. But what I found when I set aside that time is I need a really clear list of things that I'm going to work on and what my priorities are. Honestly, and this is old school, and maybe it's because I'm an old millennial. I turn 40 next month. And like I have a whiteboard that's by my desk that I just write things out on. And it's sort of my, like, I have OneNotes, I have all these other things, but if I'm going to work on something during my focus time, I put it on that list, because that's immediately where I go, where I go. I used to use sticky notes. I'm trying to get away from sticky notes. Some of you are probably like, what are sticky notes? Like, they still make those, but that's, again, maybe a little bit of my old school mindset. But to do this though with focus time, again, and this was DMC's slide, but I'd echo this, right? Have a goal, have a list of priorities, and eliminate distractions. because there's nothing worse. Oh, I got focus time. Oh man, I got 87 unread emails. So what's going to happen? That focus time is going to be gone, and you'll have a bunch of emails processed, but you won't have maybe that thing that really is your top priority not worked on. Slack, we use Teams instead of Slack, but it's the same thing. Notifications, they're great, but they can absolutely crush you when it comes to distractions. So yeah, cell phones, all other sorts of things. I like this one as well, squeeze in quick tasks. I know, John, I think for you personally, as I read some notes, that this it works for you, maybe doesn't work for everyone. I find this works really well for me for quick catch-ups on Teams and emails. I got 15 minutes. I quick check my email if I got anything that's on fire. I got a Teams message that someone needs an immediate response. 15-minute blocks work great for me. So that's the sand, right? Or maybe becomes a pebble depending on what someone's asking you to do. But I struggle with like 15 minutes for like actually getting a true task done. It's just logistically, I got to have longer time blocked. Otherwise it doesn't work effectively for me. So, but think about what are the things you got to do? How do you, I know some people turn off email or only go look there a couple times a day, and same thing with notifications. I mean, you got to find a system that works for you to be able to fit in quick tasks, quick things. John, anything to add on that one? I know this one was, I think you.
I mean, it's like sometimes meetings end 5 minutes or 2 minutes early. And for me, it's just the idea that like, hey, if I have a list of like quick tasks I can knock out, then I just go and I can hammer a bunch of them out. Maybe it's I need to review this item or feedback on this or just catch up on emails. But I found that like having a very intentional spot on like how I'm going to spend this extra time I didn't expect to have makes me able to use that time more effectively, as opposed to just, oh, maybe I should go check a handful of things. I just like knock out tasks I had planned.
Yep, great. Getting down to the end, and then we're going to do the best part. Again, another plug, stick around. Take breaks. You got to find what works for you. Maybe it's going for a short walk. Maybe you need to pull up the sports page or the news, whatever it is, but, find a way to make sure you get that mental headspace and that break that you need throughout the day. And again, I know that varies a lot. We still have some people in our office that just want to go sit in the break room and not have any technology and, eat a sandwich or whatever. And then some people, they're going to stay at their desk and that works for them to kind of compartmentalize for a short time period. So figure out what works for you and what you need, but make sure you're thinking about that as you prioritize your days and weeks. Work-life integration and balance. This is, this could be an entire topic in and of itself, and remote work and hybrid work and what's different now versus before the pandemic. I think we've all seen some shift, maybe it's substantial shift in the last few years in this, but, I think the key thing is balance, right? I think if you go too far to one side or the other, if I'm prioritizing my hobbies and my kids, which are great and all that, too much over my work's going to suffer, and vice versa, right? If I can't find a good separation and put work aside and everything I do goes home with me. Now I physically have to go home, but maybe many of you work from home and it's like literally there's no physical separation between work and home. You got to find a way to maybe something mentally, or maybe you got to change clothes, or I don't know what it is for you, but trying to find ways to find that separation that it can stay balanced. Because, and again, whether you probably know yourself well enough to which way, and my guess is if we got a lot of hard charging people on here that are being, promoted and developed within their company, they probably tend to lean more towards the work side than the life side. Just find a way to make sure you're prioritizing yourself. All right, last couple slides. DMC had this in here. I personally done this activity twice in the last 5 years. It takes a little bit of time, but I found it extremely valuable, is doing a time audit. Looking at actually where you spend your time. I don't know how DMC does it, but when I've done it, typically I go back a quarter and actually put percentages and a pie chart. And anyway, but how do you spend your time? And then you match that against your portfolio and your top 3 and where I want to be spending my time. And then you do then you start looking at what's getting in the way. And that's where things like whether it's color coding your calendar, but I've really, there's a book, Time Cleanse. I've not read that book, but I'm sure it's good and gives you some tips there as well. But this idea of the time audit, it can frankly be a really eye-opening activity and even a humbling activity when you look back and you start thinking about maybe where some of the time goes in your day, or really I spent that much time on X, that's like number 8 on my priority list, or that's even something I should delegate. So you gotta have some humility going in there with it, but it can be a very valuable activity. You gotta drill into it. And then how do you want to spend your time? What's getting in the way? And then define actions and takeaways. And again, we could spend a lot more time on this, on things that I've done. I've done meeting audits after doing this activity. I've reduced, I've canceled, I've delegated to try to make my calendar more manageable. I just really encourage you to consider. John, anything to add on this? I don't know how much you guys promote this, but I like that you're talking about it at DMC.
I don't really have anything to add on addition to what you said. I think it's
okay.
Summarize everything I would have said.
Perfect. Well, John, we got 13 minutes left and we wanted to spend 10 minutes or so in the small group. So we're going to do that. And we've got quick introductions. Here's a couple questions. So I don't know if you can snap a photo of this with your camera or whatever, but we'll spend 10. We'll just come back for just a quick minute at the end. John, hopefully you found some of this content valuable. Hopefully you can make a few new connections here. How do you organize your day? What tips have worked for you? What gets in the way? And let's go ahead and jump into some small groups for a few.